Yes, guys, welcome back to the channel. It's Kev from the gym, boxing trainer here in London, UK. Please like, comment, and subscribe. Support the channel, trying to boost the content, trying to get in the algorithm, and get things moving. So this weekend we got a big card, heavyweight card up in Manchester. Um, One fight on the card that I'm most looking forward to: David Adeleye versus Jeamie TKV. So this is just going to be a quick breakdown on that bout. Right. So I think from the outset, you probably have to make David Adeleye the favourite, slight favourite in my opinion. You'd probably say as a pro, he's boxed at a slightly higher level. Obviously, the main fight being the Fabio Wardley bout um, out in Saudi, which was obviously a big show for him, big experience being on a sort of big stage. And you'd probably say Jeamie TKV as a pro hasn't experienced that yet. So might that come with some pressures? David Adeleye has also changed trainers. He's now with Adam Booth, who I think is a great trainer, particularly for his kind of style, which is very explosive, quite reactive. And you see Adam Booth does wonders with that kind of fighter. They've had one bout together, which was the last fight against Solomon Dakers. David Adeleye, won in a couple of rounds and sort of showed again that explosiveness, lead left hook, leaping left hook even, which is not a shot that most people can throw, let alone pull off. So, it shows the kind of natural ability, natural explosiveness that he has. So I think based on the level that they've boxed at as professionals, you'd probably make Adeleye the slight favourite, and he's probably tipped to go further than Jeamie TKV. But what I will say about Jeamie TKV, slightly biased. Disclaimer: we are from the same country. Another disclaimer: we both grew up in Tottenham. He's down the road from me, and he boxed out of White Lane Boxing Club, which is down the road from where I train. So, in the amateur circuit, I've grown up sort of seeing Jeamie TKV around. So I've seen him up close, just in and around the circuit, and I know how good he is, and I also know what he hasn't shown yet as a pro. And it's quite interesting actually because Jeamie TKV, very, very experienced as an amateur, more experienced, I would say, than David Adeleye. Um, as an amateur, David Adeleye was a quite a good amateur, but more at the junior and youth level. I think as a senior, I'm not sure he did a lot of boxing as a senior. I think he might have sort of went off to uni and then sort of finished that and then turned over as a pro. Whereas Jeamie TKV's got a lot of experience in the amateurs as a senior. I remember a lot of the sort of round robin bouts he had with a good couple of fighters in the scene. Where I wouldn't say the sort of rivalries, but in amateurs, you see a lot of the same sort of faces. You box a lot of the same sort of guys. So I remember him having a great couple of fights with people like Gideon Antwi. Shout out him. He was an ABA winner. He's turned over pro. So I remember him beating Jeamie TKV, beating Steve Robinson in the amateurs, who I think he last boxed Alan Babbage. I remember Jeamie TKV having a couple of good bouts with Courtney Bennett, who's a decent pro at heavyweight. I remember him, Jeamie TKV, actually boxing Delicious Ori, who's Team GB squad, who represented GB at the Olympics 2024. And I remember, I think they boxed twice. I remember the first bout, Jeamie TKV lost on a split decision, and I think he, in my opinion, won that fight. Actually, won that bout. And I think he kind of got shagged there a little bit, and I think they had a rematch, which Delicious Ori won probably fair and square, and obviously that propelled him onto the GB squad. But Jeamie TKV's had a lot of bouts as an amateur, both at national level and international level. I remember he boxed for Congo in the African Games, I think it was, when he was trying to qualify for the Olympics. And I think he actually got robbed in the final of that. And that would have sort of pushed him on for the qualifiers for the Olympics. So a lot of good experience as an amateur. And from what I remember, his style has changed a little bit because in the amateurs, he was, from what I've seen of him, he was more sort of very reactive, very twitchy, a bit like how sort of Tyson Fury fights now, sort of on a back foot, very twitchy, very reactive. Whereas now in his pro style, you see him, he's a lot more come forward, got a great left hook to the body, but he's a bit more front foot heavy, bit more sort of likes to tear up, trying to get on the inside. So it's interesting. He's kind of changed a little bit from what I remember of him. So I think on paper you do make Adelaide a slight favourite, but I do think Jeamie TKV is a live dog in this fight. As I say, professional stage, you'd say, yep, Adelaide's boxed at probably a bit a higher level on a bigger stage. But Jeamie TKV, as I say, as an amateur, he's got some good experience nationally, internationally. I remember he boxed in Norway as an amateur, and this was in like a stadium with like 50, 60,000 people. When I think they didn't have a bout in Norway for about 30, 40 years. And this was like a big show. Cecilia Brackhurst was headlining. Klitschko's was there. And I remember they had like a lineup of quite a few amateur fights and then pro fights. But again, so he's boxed in front of, 30, 40, 50, 60,000 people as an amateur, which is not the same. But I don't think that nerves will get the best of him. If some people are banking on that, I think it's just a pretty decent fight. And you sort of have to edge, in my view, David Adeleye slightly, in my opinion, just because of the punching power. I think that's the equalizer here. Jeamie TKV, from what I've seen of him, he has got a good chin. Tough guy. What we'll do, let's just go on his box rec and look at his last couple of bouts. So looking at Jeamie TKV's record, so he's 8-5, 1 loss, 1 stoppage loss. And we look at the bout that he lost against Igor Machado. Igor quite underrated actually, because at the time he was 13-0 with 13 knockouts. So he might have lost one, but basically he had 13 wins or 12 wins, 12 stoppages. So you might say prior to that fight, it is kind of a banana skin for Jeamie, but nonetheless he took the fight. And in my opinion, that was quite dangerous matchmaking. I've seen quite a lot of Eagles bouts, and it's quite interesting. Nearly every one of his opponents somehow gets a cut or gets some sort of abrasion, and they start bleeding, which obviously affects the fight. And I don't know if it's to do with how he wraps his hands, the gloves that he wears. I don't know what it is, but for me, just based on that alone, that was quite tricky matchmaking. I mean, during the fight, Jeamie was doing fine. It's just that he had the cut, and obviously that gave Igor confidence, and he became, more on the front foot, and he just won on activity basically. But it's not like Jeamie was ever really buzzed or really hurt or anything like that. So, sometimes that can happen, and you probably just rule that out. You charge it to the game if you like, and you go again. And since then, he's had a couple of good little wins. Franklin Ignatius was a decent win. They boxed again in the amateurs. I remember that bout where Jeamie got the win. Mark Webster was a decent fight, but you would say, to be 8-5 and at the level he's boxed at, I think you do favour Adeleye and say Adeleye is the bigger puncher, certainly. And I think for me, that's sort of the only separation I find. I think they're both good fighters. They've both got decent IQ. As I say, for me, Jeamie's boxed at a high level as amateur, but in the pros, in my experience, the heavyweight division is the one division where power is really the equalizer, and it can make the difference. And for me, I think that's the only sort of difference I see between them in this. I think it's fairly even, but I do favour David Adeleye just on how explosive he is and the fact that he's got that punching power, which can be the equalizer at the heavyweight division. One thing I do say is that if David Adeleye doesn't get Jeamie out of there early, it can be quite interesting. And the reason why I say that is because David Adeleye, obviously very muscle bound, very thick set. And what you find is with boxers, heavyweight boxers with that sort of body composition, Anthony Joshua the same, is that in the later rounds, they can gas a little bit. Sometimes they'll get a second wind after that, but you do find sometimes in the second half of the fight, they can gas a little bit. And typically, the reason for that is just because when you've got so much muscle mass, it takes a lot of work for the oxygen to get all around your body. And so I do find that interesting. We saw that a little bit, I would say, with David Adeleye in his battle against Fabio Wardley. In the second half, he did sort of slow down a little bit. Fabio Wardley sort of war of attrition that sort of took over. So that might be interesting. If David Adeleye doesn't get Jeamie TKV out of there early, it might be interesting sort of the second half of the fight. Jeamie TKV is not body beautiful, but what you find is with boxers like that, again, similar to Tyson Fury, they are very, very fit. If they've trained hard, they've got a natural fitness about them. And also, he's got a wrestling background. You know, Jeamie TKV used to be, I think he was like a world champion as a wrestler, freestyle wrestler, as a youth and a junior growing up. And wrestlers are naturally fit. I know his whole family grew up in wrestling. His brothers and sisters, I think, wrestled for Team GB. I've got a funny story actually. I remember, and it's only now realizing um, who Jeamie TKV is. It was probably his dad, but I remember a couple of years ago, not years ago, but when I was a kid. So God knows how long ago. I was about 6, 7, 8 years old, and there was a Congolese man in the area in Tottenham. He was doing like wrestling classes, a wrestling session, and my dad took me to one little like training, wrestling training with a guy called Big Papa T. He was like a Congolese wrestler. I only went to one and I never went again. But fast forward down the line, 20 years later, I realize now that that was uh, Jamie's dad, actually, Jeamie TKV's dad. He was teaching wrestling in the area, sort of freestyle wrestling, because that was his background. And as I say, Jeamie was I believe, a youth world champion as a freestyle wrestler. He's got a wrestling background, so he's naturally got that fitness, got that attrition. So if it does go late, it's just going to be interesting. It's going to be interesting. But I do favour David Adeleye ever so slightly. So yeah, that's the bout that I'm most looking forward to on the card. But it's a great card. I mean, there's a lot of good fighters, good amateur fighters making their debuts. I know Ratman Musa, light heavyweight. I remember him from the amateurs. I believe he's making his debut. Delicious Ori, we spoke about, who Jeamie TKV had a couple of bouts with the amateurs. He's making his professional debut. So, shout out to them. Good luck to them. But this is just it's a great card. And, may the best man win. However, whichever way it goes, David Adeleye, Jeamie TKV, make the best man win. I think David Adeleye probably needs a victory more, just because I believe in the industry, in the boxing fraternity, people believe that his ceiling is higher. So if he loses at this sort of level, you start to maybe question where does he go? Where is his ceiling? Whereas I don't know if people expect Jeamie TKV to defeat someone like David Adeleye, or push on beyond sort of British level. So I think he can personally. I just have seen him up close, and I think David Adeleye can as well. So it's interesting about. I favour David Adeleye probably 60-40, just with the punching power being the equaliser. And yeah, we know they've sparred hundreds of rounds. I remember seeing, I think I saw one of their sparring sessions in White Hart Lane Boxing Gym years ago. Couldn't really take nothing from it, if I'm honest, but I know they've sparred hundreds of rounds as amateurs and pros. So, they know each other. So it's going to be an interesting bout. But like I say, may the best man win. This is just my thoughts and a bit of a breakdown. Not much of a prediction, but I do slightly edge David Adeleye. But fingers crossed for both men. But yeah, please like, comment, and subscribe. We're trying to boost the content, boost the channel, and get ourselves in the boxing algorithm. Follow on Instagram, on TikTok, Kev from the Gym, and Kev from the Gym 10. So yeah, more content dropping. If you like, please like. Peace.